Hello Capricorn, and welcome to your in-depth monthly horoscope for April for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout details to look out for, but please stay with me. I will dive deep to give you all the ins and outs, particularly relevant to your sign. Now there's a lot of energy that's going to be reverberating in the fifth house of your chart this month. The fifth house is where we can be particularly sunny, confident, outgoing, but also it's where we can be very creative and express our talents and individuality. So a lot of positivity flowing in for you. It is true that Mercury is going to be going through that area and going into a retrograde, so we need to explore that. But Saturn is in a new home and is forging a really significant link at the start of this month, but also at the end of this month. So I'm excited to share that with you too. If you are a returning visitor to my channel, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new here, please do share any observations and thoughts. I interact with each comment. This is very much a community. And please also do subscribe. Now, if you would like to ascend above this zodiac broadcast, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you a life roadmap report which can really help you to understand some of the patterns that have played out throughout your life and get a much more intimate understanding, the more challenging ones, but also the ones that present opportunities. Understanding those patterns is a lot to do with how we can take more control of our lives. And in my special package, you can also get your 12-month personal forecast, and there's 30% off. If you don't know your time, I have designed a new set of charts which can work with that. We don't use the ascendant and we use whole sign astrology, but based on the sun. And this will help you to reflect in my videos in a very, very positive way. Again, there's 30% off if you have the analysis and the forecast. Please see below for more on that too. So Capricorn, as April begins, so there's a collective of energy in the 4th house, which is very much our need for shelter, security, perhaps to be with the people who we're really close to. In those locations is the sun, the primary influencer of us all, but also the lovely Jupiter. And Jupiter and the sun bring a blessing this month, but more about that in a little bit. But also Mercury's in this area, and perhaps has seen you circulating some things around your mind, but Mercury's going to be moving on the 3rd into the sign of Taurus. But just before that, Venus, the ruler of the sign of Taurus, is connecting with Uranus. So right at the start of this month, there could be something dazzling that happens. Could be a social invitation. Maybe there's going to be someone that you're drawn to romantically. But it comes at a time when perhaps you've been feeling perhaps a little bit more protective and needing to be a little bit closer to the home or perhaps the most familiar people or haunts in your situation. But the planets are asking you to stay attuned to something that can just break suddenly with Venus and Uranus's connection. But Mercury on the 3rd moving into Taurus brings both opportunities this month, but perhaps 1 or 2 challenges. Immediately it clashes with Pluto. If you do decide that you want to open up a little bit, be a bit more exuberant with resources, someone close to you may see it very differently. So just be conscious of the power of Pluto and the expression that Mercury wants us to have, because it's the planet of talk and thought, could see you wanting to be a little bit more carefree with resources. But in that first week, as I mentioned, Saturn, your ruler, is forging an awesome angle to Mars. Now, when we think about Mars, we think about thrust, we think about potentially impatience. It can be to do with our desires, impatience, and of course, it has been since last August the 20th through to the 25th of March in a very practical part of your situation, But however much you may have tried to be more virtuous about marshalling your everyday world, somehow or another Neptune seemed to come along and create a little bit of a shortage of vitality. But now Mars is in your sector of relating. Technically it's not at its best in Cancer, but for you this helps you to set your boundaries. The 7th house in traditional astrology is known as the sector of open enemies, but I feel it's really where we engage with people. And part of the trick with the 7th house is to say how we feel, but also enable other people to have their opinion and reach that consensus. But Mars on the 7th house is a more robust influence. So if there is somebody that you find a bit challenging this month, the chances are you're going to push back in quite a firm way. But if you're someone who enjoys sport, especially if it's combative sports like tennis, squash, where you come up against one set partner, or you want to test yourself out in the physical domain, then Mars in this area I think can be good. But its link with Saturn is particularly significant because Saturn's now in the part of your situation to do with your everyday thinking, your immediate world, your neighbourhood, your neighbours, your connections with siblings, but also your everyday thinking. So the link between these two, the thrust and fire, even though it's in the water sign of Mars, balanced by the drier, cooler energies of Saturn, suggests that if you do need to have a discussion with someone, you can do it in an extremely constructive way. And that really sets this month up on a very positive note for you. But of course we do have the annual Libran full moon. This occurs on the 6th, and we're all asked to think about relationships. But for you, it's about professional relationships. How are you linking to the people you work with? It could be you're linking extremely well, but because Uranus forges a tense angle to the exact position of the moon, known as a quincunx, and Uranus is in a very outspoken part of your scope, the 5th house, it may be that even if you're trying to balance the work life scenario, which is something that many of us are grappling with, we have all this extra technology, yet we seem to have less time than ever. Maybe is the moon in Libra is going to see your emotions showing a little closer to the surface. And because the sun in Aries is more about being sheltered and protective, perhaps it's you that needs to speak out and ask a partner to be more supportive in terms of your work or perhaps the home domain. But do have your say. I think Uranus is going to ask you increasingly this month to really be completely authentic about the things that are important to you. But on this full moon, we do have Jupiter quite close to the Sun. So there may be somebody else in your emotional scene who's actually going to be extremely helpful and supportive. Maybe it is a friend, maybe it's going to be a relative, but someone will be there for you in a way which you're going to really appreciate. Now on the 7th, Mercury does enter its pre-shadow retrograde period. Essentially, in a technical term, it slows down. So if you are permeating any ideas, I feel that this is a month when they could ebb and flow a little bit. So on the 11th, we have the exact conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. Now, out of retrograde, it only happens once a year. So if you have been modifying where you live in some way, or changing homes, moving altogether, or you've got a new arrival coming into the family, or perhaps you want to redecorate or run a business, because Jupiter can be very much about trading and it can be about international affairs, and because of the internet, from the comfort of our sitting rooms, we can reach out to absolutely every corner of the planet. But generally the Sun conjunct Jupiter is an uplift energy, and it can give you a greater sense of security, emotional security. But on the same day, Venus does move into the sign of Gemini. For you, this is house 6, very much to do with practicalities, but it does forge a very positive link to Pluto in House 2, everyday resources. And I feel that if you are someone, and I feel Capricorn people can be very, very good at the organisation of life, making the most of your resources, running things effectively because you're a cardinal sign. But what you have an opportunity to do here is bring some personality and charm to that more practical dimension, and that can be good for perhaps some professional relationships. But the 16th to the 24th does see Mercury speed up despite the slowing down it's going through, and it connects with Uranus. This can create a lot of electricity in a very positive way. If you're someone who has got Sagittarius energy or Capricorn energy in your natal chart, you're probably someone who's quite innovative anyway, or open to new ideas. If you're someone who is much more someone who upholds traditions and is very steadfast and solid in the way you lead your life, Mercury on Uranus could be a bit of a challenge, because it's possible someone could ask you to shake your world up a little bit, think things through in a different way, be open to novel solutions or interests. This could play out in the romantic sphere or around your social life. So some friends around you may want to do something off the track, a bit more left field. If you resist this, that could cause you a little bit of tension or concern. So if you can, I would be open to just go in with the flow. There could be some surprise invitations, maybe to go and see a band or a concert, or even to go on a holiday if someone drops out last minute. But getting together people socially in a new and novel way will really stimulate you in a very welcome manner. Now, there is the second new moon in the sign of Aries within a month, obviously very rare, but it comes in the guise of a solar eclipse on the 20th. But it's so late in the sign of Aries, it's virtually counting down the minutes towards the sun's move into Taurus later in the day. If you're someone who's born right at the start of Capricorn, I think this solar eclipse can actually be very positive for you. If you're someone who's born more towards the end of the sign of Capricorn, I think it could be more stressful over the next 6 months. Essentially, the solar eclipse is asking you to tune in to how you feel about things, but then express yourself in a more passionate way around your talents, but be guided by how things feel. You know, we can all get caught up in the material world, or just conventions, or perhaps how we were taught we should respond to situations when we were younger. This solar eclipse is asking you to really embrace the opportunity to grow emotionally, and that could mean showing some more vulnerabilities in order to get the most out of the opportunity. But the sun's arrival in the 5th house also can give you a more outgoing vibe. Now, Mercury does fully slam on the brakes on the 21st. If you're single and you have been chatting to somebody, it could be a little bit erratic and maybe changeable. Maybe you'll have a meet, get on really well, and then almost within a few days it could burn out. Or equally, an ongoing friendship or relationship, which has seemed fairly steadfast and predictable, can suddenly take on a much more dazzling chemistry. So it just depends on your unique situation. But I think socially, the potential for things to be cancelled at the last minute and rearranged is really strong with Mercury's retrograde. But I wouldn't see this as a time that you can't do anything, or you can't go on that date because Mercury is retrograde. That would be a major mistake, because through the last 8 or 9 days of this month, the second great angle to Saturn comes from the Sun. So that's a very stabilising angle, good to hold the more electric, erratic energies of Mercury's retrograde in conjunction with Uranus. But also Mars in your opposite sign forges a brilliant link with Uranus in that last week. And that angle suggests that you could have a connection with someone that really is very, very lovely. You have this reputation of being very thorough, very stable in your approach to situations, but perhaps a little bit welded to what you've known in the past. So I think these energies towards the end of this month are pushing you to be more dynamic and show, after all, you are a cardinal sign. There's only 4 of those, so you're very much a leader. When you really get the thrust going in your situation, you can be very charismatic, great fun. Obviously, when you were younger, you may have been quite reserved or even a little shy, but as you've got older, you've learned to be more in yourself, and I think there's a wonderful opportunity to have some fresh interactions with people, very stimulating exchanges. And this could be good if you are looking to meet someone new, or it could be good to reinvigorate an existing relationship. But one thing I would avoid doing is immediately saying no to anything new, fresh or novel, simply because you feel safer with only what you know, because that actually can be a very narrowing way to live our lives. So do be open to new experiences as this month draws to a close. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Capricorn. Please comment or subscribe.